hello, everybody. Welcome to another what proves to be already, just as you can see who's already here with us, Miss Tiffany Yu. Very good episode of Disabilities Redefined. Tiffany, she's done it all, believe me. I just told her that I've had my homework on Tiffany has been very time consuming over the past 3 days. But it has been you're very impressive, Tiffany. Let me tell you, you landed on the 100 most influential Asian Americans list in 2017. You have been featured in Marie Claire, Forbes, and the Wall Street Journal. And you are the CEO and founder of Diversability. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you. Thank you for everything. Tiffany, I just want to jump right into this interview, to be honest with you. You know, when I was doing my homework on you, I think most people know who you are, so we really don't have to get into your back. Most people watching the show will probably know who you are. I wanted to ask, though, because there's so much going on right now in the media, as well as scholarship and the press, about disabilities and identity. How do you define a positive disability identity?
I think for me, a positive disability identity is really rooted in seeing your own self-worth and your value in an ableist society. So I do want to acknowledge that there are systemic factors and social factors that contribute to making us feel like we should have a negative disability identity, right? And so to actually course correct is to take pride in that disability identity, to say, look at my abilities and my disabilities, look at how I'm successful because of my disability, not despite my disability.
Well, something that I did appreciate about you, and again, on your website, you have a guide. You have a free guide that people can go to. And you talk about self-reflection and the concept of ableism. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I found that very interesting.
Sure. So the definition of ableism, I think definitions are very important.
Yes.
So this is my definition is adapted from T.L. Lewis and Dustin Gibson, and it is the idea that people and society place value on a person's worth based on their body and or their mind. And in that ableism guide, which you can access at my website,
yes,
the whole idea, I think I've become really fascinated by the fact that everyone has different starting points in their anti-ableism journey. And so ending discrimination, there's a saying that I often use, ending discrimination starts with self-reflection.
yes.
What I mean by that is we need to know, it's great to show up at a protest, sign a petition, make a donation, and advocate for change in policy. But if we're doing that without actually acknowledging what ableist beliefs we may still hold, and I know even as a disabled person, I have a lot of internalized ableism that I'm still actively unlearning. It's kind of that course correction and the reason why I call it self-reflection and kind of taking that step back is we almost need to build new anti-ableist habits. We need to build new habits.
Your podcast is great. I loved a lot of the interview. What's going on? How do you get a good guest? How do you define a good guest? Because, I've only been doing this show for like 2.5 years now. And I know sometimes you jump on and you don't think anybody's going to be great. And suddenly, bam, everything happens. And then sometimes you just cannot get information out of people. So, what do you look for and what do you think makes a good guest?
That's a great question. So for me, my podcast, I recently rechanged the tagline, but I mean, I feel like every single day it's going to have a new tagline, but it's a podcast about people it's a podcast about things that matter. And so for me, when I look at I look for people who are doing things that matter. And I'll just share something very quick with you. I had a teacher who's based in San Francisco come on the show to chat about how education has changed. And I looked online and I couldn't find any information about her. Like, she hadn't really done any podcasts before. She's not really a public figure. And her episode ended up having like the most listens of anyone, right? Because exactly like you said, like you can Google Tiffany Yu and you'll come across a lot, right? But you Google her, Lingere Senghor, and there's not much there, right? So I think for me, I love finding those like rare gems that haven't really had a lot of visibility, but who are already doing great work on the ground. I
Mhm.
had also, and so for me, also my podcast, I have had an existing relationship with all of my guests so far.
Right,
So at least I know what they're
right.
about and I know what I'm going to expect. And the other trick is just editing. I'm just kidding. All of
No, no, don't kid. You. We know that's the magic of Hollywood, right?
For sure. But yeah, I think for me it's, and this has always been embedded within my work as well, is my belief is as long as I keep doing the good work, my hope is that people like you will take notice and then
Yes.
will help amplify those messages.
Yes, yes. Well, listen, I think a lot of us are taking notice, Tiffany, and you're doing great work. So again, it's such an honor just to meet you. And your mission statement, you use these words here, and I love the way you said something earlier about defining. Definitions are vastly important, and
Mm-hmm.
you used intersectional disability representation, and that's one of your
Yes.
goals. Can you,
Yes.
elaborate and define those words for us? Because I thought that was wonderful.
Yes. So, and again, I think one of the things that I'm learning on this journey, both from a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, but also from a social justice lens, is that sometimes the words that we use aren't landing with people because they don't even know what those words are,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And that's why these definitions are important. So
yeah.
I actually did look it
Very
up
good.
in advance of this, so I'm just going to read it to you. So intersectionality was coined in the 1980s by someone named Kimberly Crenshaw. And she coined the term intersectionality as a prism for seeing the way in which various forms of inequality often operate together and exacerbate each other. What I mean by that is, so in layman's terms, to me, that's when oppression becomes exacerbated because you hold multiple oppressed identities.
Yes.
For me, I'm a woman I'm a woman of color. I'm a disabled woman of color. And those three intersecting identities contribute to the way I move about the world. And
Yes.
at any one point in time, one identity can be more oppressed than another. But I also, so the reason why I included that on our website is that and again, you may want to do some self-reflection on who your guests have been, right? Have they been mostly physical disabilities? Have they been mostly people who are white identifying? Or are they people who are mainly male? Is there a mix? What's the sexual orientation? So for us, it's how can we diversify the stories that are out there? Because as we're recording this, right, it's Black History Month, and Black disabled history is a big part of disability history as well. And Black history is a big part of disability history. And
Yes.
how can we acknowledge how they intersect with each other?
Excellent, excellent. And you're absolutely right. And again, Tiffany, that gets back to where we started, the self-reflection factor. Any thought, what do you think about the current trend and recognition of disabilities in fashion and show in Hollywood?
Yeah, I mean, again, our mission is intersectional disability representation, and when I say that, I mean in all areas, right? Not just in policy making, not just in like dance and the arts, but also in fashion as well. So I'm not as connected, but I am really excited. As we're recording this, we've just gotten news of this new Nike adaptive shoe that has come out, which is very exciting. And I think what people are realizing, right? And someone sent me a video and they tagged Jimmy Fallon in it because Jimmy Fallon had drawn how he wanted this shoe, and he's like, well, you know what, actually, like, I want this shoe for me, but it's also going to be helpful for people who are disabled, for people who can't, bend down to tie their shoelaces. It's going to have multiple uses, right? So as we think about fashion, I'm disabled. One of my arms is shorter than the other, but that doesn't mean I don't want to look good,
Yeah.
And I feel like so much of both the work you're doing and I'm doing is around flipping the script, right? How can I be disabled and look
Yes,
like you?
yes, thank you, thank you. Because I just have to say, again, it's also a personality thing to think that because you're a beautiful young woman, why wouldn't you want to look attractive? So again, it's that definition. Sometimes I think when people automatically hear the word disability, they don't associate it with fashion or they don't associate it with Hollywood. That's not right. And
Yeah.
the intersectionality is vastly important, vastly
Yeah.
important.
And I'll also I'll share something just very quickly around ableist microaggression. So when people, as we're recording this, you can't necessarily see that my arm is paralyzed, right? I'm passing as a non-disabled person. And so when people find out that I am disabled, sometimes people respond with, "But you're so pretty." And I find that interesting too. And I know they mean well, right? And so that's the thing with the self-reflection is when people say these things, they're not trying to harm, but they're setting up a narrative that one group's body or mind is better than another.
Final question. What advice do you have for anyone out there who would like to start their own business or would like to be the next Tiffany Yu or is interested in becoming, social media, social influencer? I learned a new terminology the other day, but yeah. Listen, I'm a little bit older than you, okay? So social influencer is a new terminology for me, but what advice do you have for those people who might be interested in other words, using you as a role model and becoming the next Tiffany Yu?
I love that. So I have actually moved from, and again, words very important, from role model to a phrase that Laverne Cox coined called possibility model.
Mhm.
Because I don't know if I necessarily want people to fall directly in my footsteps, but I want to show people what the possibility looks like of what you could do.
Mhm.
And when I look back at the journey, it was really everything that I have done in my life, I have done because that is what I needed for myself. And so I feel like we're going to go back to how we started this conversation, which is take some time to self-reflect. And by self-reflecting, look at if there are areas of your life where you're noticing there are gaps that you have the expertise and the capacity to solve. So for me, I grew up just feeling so alone. And because I couldn't find any possibility models, any role models, I created a community that brought together disabled and non-disabled people so that I could start to learn how to better talk about my disability narrative in a more empowering way. Because I had a lot of internalized ableism that I wanted to unlearn and a lot of disempowering narratives that were fed to me. So that's the first step. Self-reflection is one way to put it. I often call it looking in the mirror, seeing what's coming back at you. And then I think the other part is just knowing that whatever you're putting out there is serving a much larger mission than yourself.
Mhm.
And one of my friends who also runs a very large community, but his is for Asian entrepreneurs, he recently asked me, he said, "Tiffany, what do you do when you're just feeling so frustrated by all the egos in your community, different things like that?" And I told him, I said, I remind myself that my mission is bigger than me. And so if I'm getting caught up in the day-to-day, who am I trying to serve? Because I had a great conversation earlier today where I was speaking to the CEO of Easter Seals. I'm a proud ambassador of their incredible work. And I was chatting about how a lot of the things that I'm advocating for, I feel extremely privileged because the extent of my disability and the way I've set up my life has enabled me to be able to show up in all of these spaces. So how can I use whatever power and privilege I have to fight for more disability equity?
Mhm.
So long story short, look in the mirror, see if there's something you can solve for yourself, and chances are it's going to help other people. That was point number one. Point number two is I think whatever you put out is going to resonate with someone, even if that's your younger self.
Mhm.
And I think just trust in the process, because I feel like a lot of people just give up prematurely. I've had that Instagram account. I mean, I've had all of my accounts for years. I never saw myself as an influencer or a content creator, but now I'm starting to get messages that are like, "Tiffany, can you share this?" Or, "With your influence, can you do this?" And part of my own learning process is how can I take ownership of that, even though that's not necessarily what I was looking for. So also be open to the opportunities that may come your way.
Again, I really have enjoyed just most of the week has been, spent reading up on you. You've done great things. Everybody go to her website, tiffanyyu.com. You've got, TED Talks, you've got everything there. You're so involved with just about everything, from Tide to Wall Street Journal to the whole TikTok to the whole 9 yards. Believe me, whoever's watching, this young lady does it all, okay? All right, you will not be disappointed going to her website. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.